day 3, so it's always a long road. So it's delightful to see those who are here. We're going to talk today a little bit about competitive socializing. I think as the region continues to evolve, Dubai, we're a trends-based city. We're always looking for the new thing. Within the GCC, we have huge opportunity when it comes to new types of experiences, of customer engagement within Saudi. And globally, we're seeing some new trends, which I think we're definitely going to be part of. So it's a pleasure to have Zachary from Zachary Pullman Design Studio and Jennifer from the Griff Collective, who you already know. And I think today we're going to talk a little bit about how this reflects the future of how people are going to interact with hospitality and how people are going to interact with F&B. Now, I know I have been well schooled on competitive socializing by both our panel and some of our people in the audience, but I think maybe that's a really good place to start. What are we talking about when we're talking about competitive socializing? Zach?
So yeah, I've been asked that question all week and maybe the last few years and still struggling to find a good answer. So it's effectively you're fusing play with food and drink.
So, Jennifer, as you sit in the Dubai, at the center of the Dubai F&B world, what are the trends we're seeing here in terms of experiential versus food-focused versus customer segments, especially, and then how that starts blending into hospitality offerings?
That's a big question. But I think basically at the moment we're seeing that there's a shift in consumer behaviors around the world in terms of, I think it's no surprise, and everyone knows that people are drinking less. They're wanting to have a more kind of wholesome going out experience and a way to connect with people that's not just in a bar. So I think, we're seeing that things like, run clubs are becoming very popular, and people are looking for ways to connect kind of in a more natural way. So I think things like competitive socializing that we're seeing, we just saw a deal done by Sunset Hospitality to acquire part of Solutions Leisure. One of the reasons I believe that was done was because they have developed their competitive socializing areas through what they've created with the Wave House and in Abu Dhabi. So I think we're seeing a movement towards competitive socializing by the bigger groups as well. We've had swingers come into the market here, and I believe Sunset is taking over 3 stories at JBR to create a big adult competitive socializing hub. So I think it's a trend that is here, but is going to accelerate in the next 12 months.
So Zach, we've been talking a little bit of that. Maybe it'd be good to kind of give some examples of what success stories do we have globally of types of competitive socializing. Yeah. But as you said, blending F&B and play, how has the alcohol component played out traditionally? And then maybe we can dig into a little bit about how that might be applied to our markets, especially Saudi.
So I think competitive socializing is effectively still in its infancy. So say it's 10 years old. The most well-known one that you probably know in this region is Topgolf. And as a category, it's effectively gone from more or less nothing to, I think it's now looking at sort of 20 billion in the next year. And the alcohol content, as you've seen a pattern of millennials, which is driving this sort of business, dropping because they're more experience-based as opposed to anything else. You see that the alcohol consumption is more about quality as opposed to quantity. So they're sort of having a night where you're drinking yourself to oblivion is sort of a thing of the past. Those guys, they want to show up at work, they want to be focused the next day, and they're very into their health, and the sort of excessive drinking is actually a less factor than people think, but they're going for more quality. So how does that play out in a country like here? I think it's probably going to be the same thing, that you're going to have to make sure that you've got all your plates spinning really well. You can't rely on any one component within that business. So you have to have your drinks at a super high level, you have to have your food at a super high level, and you have to have the whole hospitality factor at a super high level, which traditionally hasn't happened in these sort of mixed venue things. They've just been a bit one-sided, and now it's a much more rounded sort of... The ones that will succeed will get everything working really well.
So Jen, looking at this, kind of coming back to this idea of how are we rethinking hospitality in the region? How are we thinking the role of F&B? This isn't simply, oh, we've got some extra space, people need to eat, let's rent it out, get the real estate, drive that as a simple kind of rent-based business that a lot of hospitality partners have done traditionally, or it's average level but a service that you think it needs to be. As hospitality becomes more and more competitive, we've certainly had a lot of conversations with hospitality, owners and operators who are looking to differentiate themselves. Is this something which you see as being an opportunity of starting to build into the hotel inventory pool as we start blending those things together?
I think potentially, but I think coming back to your point, I think at the moment that's where the opportunity is going to be in terms of if you have all those plates spinning correctly, because it's such a competitive market that you can't have like nachos and like an overcooked burger while someone's paying a fortune to play golf. Like it has to be the full package because the market has become so competitive and the standards are so high and the expectations are so high. But coming back to what you were saying, I think that this is an interesting way for hotel owners to also activate spaces that are potentially underutilized, because traditionally hotels are big boxes and not all of your, the TrevPAR in terms of what you're getting per your actual floor space has been potentially quite low. And so by finding ways to activate maybe an unused all-day dining area with something like this that takes up space, brings people in and engages with the local community, I think there's big potential.
Yeah. It's been a perfect ingredient for repurposing space. There's been a lot of sort of cinema failures, effectively the entire cinema industry is failing. There's a lot of large department stores that are failing within shopping centres, what goes in there. There's also been sort of within the hotel world, I think, like you're saying, repurposing space. There's a lot of conference rooms that aren't really working anymore. And, these things aren't small. They start making sense at 5,000 square feet. We've done them up to 125,000 square feet. You can get an unbelievable return if you get it right at 25,000 square feet, because you're operating that with half of it with no operational cost. So you can get 95% return on half of your venue with no operating cost once you put it in.
So I think this was the piece that kind of blew my mind. It was like when I started looking at the soft play sector, it turns out it's an incredibly amazing return.
As a mother, the soft play sector is insane.
But it's incredible, right? And in terms of those markets you're connecting into, who are prepared to spend significant amounts of money to do different things. So we were kind of talking about what the blend looks like, and the shift in the sector, even though it's emerging, is away from team building, away from, as you say, millennials, and there is this piece with families. Obviously, as a heavily family-driven region, how do we start relating those two things together?
So I think that's a really interesting point, because I think having had conversations with some competitive socializing concepts that are coming into the region, their automatic reaction has been to have alcohol and to be kind of around young people and in those areas. And some of them have discarded malls and places where they can't get a license. Whereas I don't know the answer, but I think there's an opportunity to rethink the model, some of these competitive socializing models that are coming into the market, so that they are family-friendly venues, or maybe have different day parts. Because I think that there's a big opportunity to tap into exactly what you're mentioning as well, is that soft play cash that people are willing to throw to keep their families entertained, particularly in summer. But I think people also now want more family experiences, or experiences they can have all together, rather than just the parents go off and have dinner and the kids, go to soft play. And
I think what's about to happen is the ones that will do it well is, if you're talking about the shopping mall, is you have these competitive socializing things that will change their market or their customers relative to periods of the day, and some of them will actually change the physical setup of the space from time to time, as well as the aesthetic. So the whole space will be evolving constantly.
So where as you said, you've done 25,000 to 125,000 square foot venues. Where is the demographic? Is this a luxury experience? Is this a very accessible experience? Is that something that can be targeted and changed depending on where you're sitting and what you're doing? Like, how is that starting to evolve as the sector kind of gets into its teenage years?
Yeah, I think the luxury hasn't really happened. There's some premium stuff. It hasn't really moved into the luxury area. I think what's happened in England is you've had to make your model work unbelievably hard because of the changes in people going to the offices, people going to shopping malls for more of an experience. There's so many different reasons that it just has to be a very dynamic thing in order to make it work.
And for you, as we're looking forward, we're looking at this as a sector that's going to be growth. Where do you see the next step of this competitive socializing? I think here it's like when the escape rooms arrive, right? Suddenly everybody, it was timeout, was this is what you do at the weekend in the summer, you go to an escape room. And I think we're now seeing some of this with kind of, as you say, Topgolf, swingers, a few of these other things that have coming in. But what happens next? We're introducing it, but in more established markets, what's the growth path?
There's another very important element that sort of this is coming with this is the tech element within it. So you've got all the sort of obvious sort of learning as AI comes along, but you've got the tech element of the actual games and where you can actually use your competitive sort of spirit within people, and with the combined of the sort of knowledge we have on Iran, where you can actually build a community for these spaces, so you can sort of increase your return customers, and you can actually get whole venues to compete against other venues, and there's a sort of competition between all your organizations. And I guess ultimately someone will do it where you can compete from one company to the next company, and there's a sort of league system within the play, but a very useful tool to just help build your community.
And what I think is interesting is what the Westin has done. I haven't been there myself, but I hear a lot about it, where they've created like a mashup of kind of Topgolf and the Arts Club. And so they have, I think it's called, I should have done my research, but I think it's called Iron House or something like that. And basically you go there apparently any day of the week, any time, and it's packed and people are signing up to do the Topgolf kind of experience, but in a members club setting. And people are co-working there and they're using it as kind of a social space, as you're saying.
And then you might get that space, for example, before it even opens, 5 a.m, yoga. And it's designed in a way where everything can slide out the way. It's actually a proper yoga space, not like someone shoved the furniture in one corner. It actually feels intentional.
So maybe we can dig into a little bit of this. I think it's a word that I've heard a lot over the last 18 months within the region, which is this idea of community. Everybody's looking for community. Our private members clubs are exploding in Dubai. We're also seeing those starting to reach out to Jeddah, to Riyadh. There's a whole piece of people want to feel part of something. Jennifer, how are you kind of seeing that evolve, and do you see a role for large-scale activities like this as plugging into that community-based hospitality F&B as it's starting to come together here in Dubai?
I think it's a really interesting question because I think we are seeing people want to connect in a more kind of structured way than we have previously. And maybe that comes back to, as we're saying, people aren't going out to bars as much and stumbling into each other as they used to back in the day. So they're looking for other ways to find that kind of connection. And I mean, I go down to the beach, like to Kite Beach Fields at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And it is basically like an outdoor nightclub. You've got other gorgeous 20-somethings in their exercise gear flirting with other gorgeous 20-somethings, and they're pumping music and they're getting ready to go on a run. And they're doing collabs with all sorts of brands. They're doing collabs with restaurants. They're doing collabs with cafes. And I think that communities are a really good way for hospitality to connect with an existing community already, but then make themselves part of it. And I think that there's a big shift from kind of influencers into community leaders as well. And I don't know where that's kind of going to go, but I think it's an interesting development to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot of community wash. There used to be greenwash, wasn't there, 20 years ago? Now I think there's a lot of community wash, but it's finding that magic ingredient where there's actually a common interest, an authentic common interest. Like you said, the joggers, that's something they enjoy doing. It's something you'd enjoy doing again and again and again. There's a health benefit with it, and those sort of things are very sticky. And it's how do you feed those into your F&B concepts?
Do competitive socializing win an ice bath? So to touch a little bit more on the technicalities of it, let's talk about the design. Is this something which needs to constantly be reinvented? Are you seeing, from your perspective, and obviously as a design studio, that obviously would be lovely if everybody wants to completely renovate every 6 months. But how do you see these? Do you see these as being established as institutions which people are going back to, or do you think that this is something which is going to have to continue to reinvent itself from a design perspective as facilities become established in different communities and different cities?
Yeah, I think there's definitely different schools. There's a nostalgic sort of setup with bowling, with golf and stuff like that, where it's actually quite tech low. And then there's another wave of stuff like F1 Arcade, Putt Shack, Electric Shuffle, Flight Club, these ones where they've designed their own sort of tech. And it's actually not the most important thing. The most important thing is creating a new world that tech sits within. But they do have unique tech. They are able to customize the journey, make it much more personal. They are able to do so many things with that, and it's getting better and better and better. They're able to, where so many evenings now distorted by people taking out their phones and taking snaps and trying to memorize the whole evening. That's done for you without you even knowing, and a million times better than you could do it yourself. So it's actually making the experience better than you do it yourself. So I think there's two schools that are doing it. The ones that are doing the tech, they're not even doing it. They're doing extremely well, but they're not doing it in a tech-heavy way. It's kind of subtle, it's invisible, and it's making it a seamless experience, which is what brings the sort of value to it.
And when we're starting to look at like some of the other parts of the world, has this started to penetrate in the Asian markets? Where are we seeing kind of the hubs of competitive socializing flowing from? Obviously, we know London is your home base and kind of where this is kind of started in many ways. What does that look like from a global picture rather than a local picture?
So I think London's been a little bit ahead of the curve on this particular subject, and we've been working America, China, Australia, I think are the key sort of markets where it's getting adopted rapidly.
And just coming back to the numbers, which I thought were fascinating, they keep blowing my mind. That I learned today that the Top Golf in Dubai is the most profitable one in the entire global community of Top Golf. So we're very much driving this around sport, around concepts, around community. How do we capitalize on making it that most successful? Is that about market calibration, or is it about a single concept that's gonna work best? Jennifer, how do you feel like that translation happens for us here in the GCC?
I think it's interesting because at the moment we're also seeing the first wave of competitive socializing companies kind of struggle or go into foreclosure in the States. So I think there was a huge wave that came about. As you said, it's like about 10 years old. So I think you're getting that first wave of kind of consolidation. And a lot of them, I think, were potentially too big, too mono, they're focused on one thing and the novelty wore off. I think in this market, it's going to be about venues that have a lot of different things that they offer. And also, as we were saying before, and to Zach's point, appealing to different day parts so you can appeal to different segments, potentially. But I think, as you said, Topgolf, the numbers are insane, and there has to be room for other competitors to come into the market.
I think the ones that are probably failing in the States, they had an idea that the first couple did so unbelievably well. They're like, great, let's open 20 in the next year. And then you're like, well, it was good in those two locations, but maybe it wasn't such a good idea. The novelty came along. It wasn't brilliant to start with, but now we've got 20 venues that are all based on an idea that was all sort of okay, living off its original sort of boost. And how do you get through that going forward? I think you deliberately design the venues, and you design a maintenance and refurbishment schedule, or you, if your budget's 100, you say, okay, we only want to use 80 of your budget, and we want to put that other 20% over the next sort of 4 years, and it's intentionally got bits that you add to over time. And then you should, I think also with the tech and how you, because these spaces are quite large, it's a big investment, it could be 10, 20 million per site, you should design it in a way that it's actually easily changed through technology. So we're doing a lot of sort of projection work, a lot of sort of high-tech sort of lighting, which will allow you to change it, not only, you can change it seasonally, so you can do your Christmas intentionally, you can do back to school intentionally, Easter, you can do all those sort of things. And it's actually a fusing also with a sort of retail mentality that allows you to change it visually quite significantly, but actually the low cost. I think that's how you stay relevant, where a lot of people have just gone, okay, there we go, we're good for 5 years. And that's not, I think we've moved on. The intention span of all these places is so short now. Everyone wants the next hot ticket. How do you keep your place evolving as from the beginning?
No, I think that's exactly it.
So thank you so much for this. I think the reason this has been such an interesting panel for me, this is a stealth sector. I think as we move more into, as you say, collabs, participation, tech integrated experiences, this is a sector which has huge potential to be that connector and that community builder in so many different ways. So thank you so much, Zach. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think this has been a nice snapshot of hopefully something you're going to see a lot more of over the coming years. Thank you so much.